Compelled decisions made by the Russian authorities in post-war period have determined the population life for tens or even hundreds of years ahead. An object which helped to provide shelter and hope now deprives people of their individuality and the right to stand out. But does it have a potential to be repurposed in the present and to be a symbol of regeneration in the future? After the Second World War, shortage of housing became a critical issue worldwide. New towns, such as Romerstadt, built outside of Frankfurt, were aimed to accommodate minimum income groups. Most of the countries chose prefabrication and mass production as a solution. At first, concrete prefabricated housing was used in Germany and France, and then the technology spread all over the world. Now, a quarter of the world population live in concrete panel houses. In 1930s, when Khrushchev was in power of USSR, Soviet engineers studied German social housing. In 1955, when the mass construction of panel houses began, the whole country turned into one huge factory with an established mechanism. Before, people lived in barracks and dormitories, such as these ones, still preserved in Arkhangelsk. In 1952, almost 4 million people lived without electricity, sewerage, and central heating. The rest of the population lived a little better in densely populated communal apartments. When the high-speed construction began, concrete prefabricated blocks became symbols of rational future and gave people hope for a better life. Families received their tiny apartments in new buildings at the expense of the state. Many still remember this as a moving into luxurious castle, since they no longer needed to huddle in the room with 20 neighbors. Construction was the main goal of every person in the socialist state. Everyone contributed, from the workforce to films and posters. However, we have come a long way since the beginning of 20th century. But in Russia, all the 90 series of panel houses reach 55% of the total number of apartment buildings. 5-story types, initially built as temporary housing in 50s and 60s, reach 30%. For decades, the state has changed the number of stories and sections, orientation and facing of buildings. What remained unchanged was obtaining the minimum cost of a square meter at the high rate of construction, keeping the panel as a main building element. Russia is located in 3 climatic zones: Arctic, subarctic, and temperate. In diverse climatic conditions, it is necessary to apply a different approach to construction, which is barely taken into account in Soviet buildings. Thus, in some regions of Russia, buildings with service life of 50 years, after a lapse of already 70, are not repaired and still inhabited. Authorities prefer to demolish houses one by one instead of renovating them. Residents are gradually being resettled, but even in the cities of federal significance, this procedure may be delayed. And in underfunded towns, one can wait for relocation for years or even decades. It leads to strong outflows of the population to the central district and formation of ghost towns. Most regions do not receive sufficient funding from the state. Because of this, a widespread culture of cooperative construction developed in small cities. Residents got used to taking care of their own neighborhoods and backyards, working as a community in their micro-districts. Shifting the attention to the small scale of Soviet private life, we can see the desire to establish a sense of ownership in the new provided flats in 1960s. Buying things for the apartment was something new and exciting. However, it was associated with greed and individualism due to the socialist idea of withdrawal from consumerism temptation. In the conditions of a commodity deficit, personal objects became symbols of social status. Receiving rare interior items was a celebration for the entire family. People in small Russian towns are emotionally attached to their place of residence. They do not want to part with their first flat and well-established way of life. However, the resettlement program doesn't give local residents a chance to keep the habitual place of living. This project opposes renovation to knocking down the panel houses. The aim is the adaptation to the particular regions and districts. There is a chance to bring the oppressed cities back to life and implement the rich history and culture into the designs. The project takes one district at a time as a subject for private investigation and rebuilds it from scratch with the use of materials available there. Petropavlovsk is an example of a diversity of natural environment. The city experiences a strong depopulation at the moment. A group of volunteers from a local community could oversee the redevelopment of the area from the very beginning. They would be given a choice of their preferred location with different advantages, such as proximity to workplace or to river or ocean shore. Participants could also choose from a row of public space options by voting with their future neighbors. Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky is a seismic activity region. 5-story buildings were reinforced with concrete monolithic structures there. However, there are other ways to retrofit for seismic activity, such as shear walls and cross bracing, which could also embed public spaces into the building. The main intention is to come up with an alternative to a factory of faceless building production established in the USSR. The most important aspect of a new factory is working with small cooperative and indigenous people. In contrast to the 1960s, now there is no race for the largest number of buildings in the shortest possible time, and individualism is no longer considered something forbidden. Improvement of houses will be customized by local residents who know their area and home better than any developers and government officials. There is a countless number of criteria that can affect the approach to renovation, from the average temperature and rainfall in the city to the age of residents and their health status. In some cities, it will only be possible to make minor changes, such as applying insulating layers to the walls or replacing of plumbing and heating. In towns with decreasing population, circumstances allow to make more interventions due to incomplete occupancy by residents. The issues of chaotic balconies look, lack of public space, small layouts of apartments could be addressed keeping the position of load-bearing walls. In the opposite case, if it is necessary to increase the living space, the facades can be replaced with supplementary structures. In some cases, elevators, ramps, places for joint study, or shared kitchen could be added. Now, panel housing is accused of the problems occurred in the society. However, in 1960s, it was a powerful tool for the construction of a bright future. To meet the needs of a modern person, today's housing needs a re-examination, being inspired by a collective memory of the concrete panel.